Greetings out there once again, Internet. Nick Cicada here, back for another fascinating video on the subject of asexuality. I wasn't going to make another video about asexuality so soon, but I had a fascinating conversation last night with my sister that opened my eyes to a subject that I don't think I've talked about in detail before, that being what I refer to as the asexual double standard. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Just a quick disclaimer here at the beginning of the video. This is only my own personal experience as an asexual. Your experience as an asexual may be completely different. I don't actually know any other asexuals, so I only have my own personal life to go off of here. And asexuality is a very poorly studied, misunderstood topic that I don't really know anything about beyond my own personal experience. So your mileage as an asexual may vary entirely. Take whatever I have to say on this topic with a grain of salt, but nonetheless I do think I'm entitled to speak about it because I am asexual. For some context here, my sister is hypersexual. I would probably describe her as that. She experiences very strong sexual desires. She's been with dozens of guys. She really enjoys having sex. So we're basically complete opposites in that regard. And last night, as it happens, I got into a discussion with her, a very heated, passionate discussion about the topic of asexuality and how asexuals should be treated. I started off by mentioning somewhat casually that I was interested in a monogamous platonic friendship. And I guess my sister had never heard of any of this kind of thing before. It sort of flies over her head. I said that I'd like a friend who, much like myself, because this is my personal experience, has never had sex, isn't ever going to have sex, and just likes talking all the time, but will never get a boyfriend or anything, and just enjoys being around me all the time. And the key distinction that doesn't make her my girlfriend is that we never have sex, which I think is a reasonable boundary, because that's what I always hear. Once you have sex, you're not just friends anymore. You're boyfriend and girlfriend now. So me and this hypothetical friend, who doesn't at all exist, she's really just a thought experiment, and a darn interesting thought experiment at that. Me and this friend would never have sex, but I'd really be her only option because everyone else, obviously, wants to have sex. And I don't want to have sex at all. And ideally, neither would she, with me or anyone, until the end of time. My sister was very confused by this proposition and put forward the idea that if we're monogamous, that is, if my friend never gets a boyfriend, then that's just the same as me being her boyfriend, which I don't think is the case at all. Again, for the aforementioned reason that if me and my friend don't have sex, then I'm not her boyfriend. No matter what, no matter how much influence we have over each other, we can have a very strong platonic friendship. Despite being, different genders, we can really have a very strong, deeply connected platonic bond, because the way I see it, I think I've mentioned this before, is that platonic love and romantic love are two separate forms of love, and they are in direct competition with each other. They're not actually comparable, they're not actually analogous as many people think. And romantic love is not just a heightening of platonic love. It is a separate thing that is for a completely different purpose. Platonic love is just when you have someone around you who you feel cool around, and you can be like, yeah, let's hang out, let's do something fun together. Romantic love is way more heated, way more passionate, way more trippy-dippy and gooshy-squooshy, and the type of love that doesn't interest me at all. I'm interested in a mutual respect, a celibate camaraderie, a sort of deep-seated admiration for the other person and whoever they are, but not a desire to have sex with them or caress them or whisper sweet nothings into their ear, because to me, who's also a romantic, that sounds fucking stupid. I brought this up that me and my hypothetical friend would not feel romantically toward each other, and that it's flawed of her to assume that romantic love and platonic love are compatible, because from personal experience, as someone who can only experience platonic love, I found that platonic love and romantic love are not compatible at all, and that the addition of romantic love to a platonic relationship, or in my case most of the time, when one of my friends gets a boyfriend, the quality of the friendship drops substantially. So the only logical conclusion I can draw from that is that friendships decrease in quality when romance is introduced. That makes perfect sense to me. But I suppose to my sister, who, again, has only engaged in these sorts of romantic lovey-dovey relationships her entire life, she was baffled by the prospect of a healthy, meaningful, deeply resonant, emotionally supportive intergender platonic friendship where both parties agree not to have any romance on the side because they don't need it. So we went back and forth for some time, with my sister insisting that what I wanted to be was just a boyfriend, and me insisting that, well, no, I wouldn't want to be a boyfriend because that sounds stupid. I want to be a platonic friend with someone who can also only experience platonic friendship and doesn't want a boyfriend. Specifically, I just want to know someone who's like really close and fun to be around, and who never wants to have sex, just wants to read, go to a movie, frickin' walk, you know, stuff that has way less stakes and way less hormonal transfer and way less angst. I don't want to experience any of that, and yeah, I just hope to find someone who's like chill and cool, like how I am pretty much. So my sister got very heated at this, especially when I suggested that maybe not only could I form this kind of deeply resonant platonic friendship with an asexual girl, because again, there are so few asexuals in the local area that my odds of stumbling across one who also happens to share all my other interests and stuff is basically like nil. But I could also probably enter a deeply committed one-on-one platonic friendship with a straight girl who just doesn't get a boyfriend because I'm so fun to be around that they never feel like they need sex or want romance or sex, because I'm able to be emotionally supportive, very present for them, you know. Just no sex, but we talk a lot, we catch up on stuff, shoot the shit. It's a fun time all around. I don't necessarily think this is possible anymore. I've been around the block so long that my delusions of ever having this kind of deeply committed platonic friendship with someone who's straight and who has a sex drive and feels the necessity of sexual intercourse is probably very low. But every time one of my friends who is straight gets a boyfriend or something, I feel as if I failed them somehow as a friend, that they feel they need to go out and get someone else to have sex with, and I feel like a complete and absolute failure, and it makes me feel like shit every time. I just feel like shit. I can't really explain it further than that. It's just the type of feeling that makes you want to die. So it's at this point that my sister made reference to what I'll refer to for the purposes of this video going forward as the asexual double standard. I call it the asexual double standard, but there are really a whole host of asexual double standards, because basically when you're asexual, everything about a relationship is turned upside down and topsy-turvy and on its head. And basically everything is different, or the opposite of what's expected from an allosexual relationship. My sister put forward the notion that if I was someone's friend and they started having a boyfriend who they have sex with, and I was upset by that because I would prefer a monogamous platonic friendship where neither of us has sex, and if I'm willing to not have sex, then I would expect the person who I'm friends with also to not have sex, just because that's fair and equal, makes sense from my perspective. That if I did this, I would be extremely selfish. Not only selfish, but potentially abusive, not to want my friend, who, again, is completely hypothetical. I've never even had a friendship this strong to this extent. Not to want my friend to have sex with someone else. So it was at this point that I brought up the general analogy, which goes a long way to illustrate just how much asexuals and aromantics are treated as a subhuman class unworthy of consideration. If it's okay for the friend of an ace/aro person to go out and have sex willy-nilly with anyone they want, then is it okay for a husband or a wife in a marriage to go out and have sex with anyone they want to, willy-nilly? You have to apply the same standard to both cases, because the friendship that I feel, the Platonic urges, are so strong because friendship is the only form of human connection I can make. I can't be romantic or sexual with people, that I feel as if I'm married to some of these people. Not all of them, certainly, but a few. I feel so committed to friendship. I feel so heavily connected to the Platonic ideal and the notion that we can just be civilized people who talk all day and never have sex, that it does hurt me, and I do feel as if I'm a victim of infidelity when people have sex. I don't know if this is a case of me just being extremely confused and misguided about how human relationships are supposed to work. It easily could be. I don't know that much about human behavior or human relationships at all. I don't know why I'm expected to. I've never engaged in any of the traditional sort, so I have no idea how this thing is supposed to go. But if you have an ace/aro friend and you're straight, what I would suggest is just don't have sex and spend a lot of time with them, and they would really appreciate you for that, and they would love you for that. They'd think, wow, my friend is really cool. They're willing to just forfeit sex, because that stuff is boring, and I consider it boring. I'm ace/aro, but they're willing to just hang out with me instead. Wow, I sure am cool and appealing, and a nice person that's fun to get along with. So yeah, that's what I think should generally happen if you have an ace/aro friend. That's the nicest approach. So this, in perhaps the simplest terms possible, is the asexual double standard. I am held to unreasonably high expectations in every single relationship I enter, and I do consider Platonic friendships relationships because when I go into them, when I express interest in becoming someone's friend, I expect them to recognize that changes the nature of who I am and who they are, and it will have repercussions and consequences and results. I am expected as a person to put up with literally anything, because people have had this drilled into their head that friendship is just constant validation, and friends should just always be there for you and always be a great pal and just like no strings attached. And when I first started making friends, I used to take that approach too. I used to be like, wow, friendship is so fun, it's so casual, and there are no stakes to it. I realized, well, no, there are stakes. They're unique stakes, but they're different from romantic type stakes, but they are there. And that kind of needs to be acknowledged, that like, I can't just be expected to constantly placate and assuage every shitty behavior my friends do. Good friends don't just placate you. They will help you grow and change and develop and take an active role in your life. They'll be there for you for emotional support, yes, but they will also call you out if you make a mistake or you exhibit some kind of unwanted behavior. They'll keep you in check, and they'll make you a better person, ideally. That's what I think a successful friendship should achieve. It was at this point, roughly, that my sister said, well, you say that you're asexual and you have no interest in sex, but you talk about sex more than anyone I know. And I said, well, yes, as a neutral, unbiased, third-party observer who just views sex as a weird farce that I don't participate in, but I do find it fascinating nonetheless. And what to you is a subconscious system of impulses that's baked into you genetically just doesn't happen for me. I don't understand what sex is, why anyone would have it, why anyone would prefer having it. But as an asexual, by and large, in every friendship I enter into, they will always choose the person they can have sex with, the boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever the case may be, over the person they can't have sex with, me. And I don't know how people don't recognize that that would make me feel like shit to always be considered a subhuman object that can just be tossed around and commodified and invalidated and treated as if I don't have any feelings. Now, if one of my friends asked me, hey Nick, what boyfriend should I get? None of them have ever done this, but if someone were to show me like a lineup of like, 5 boyfriends, I would just say, don't get a boyfriend. Let's just be pals and talk a bunch. And maybe, talking with me will be so fun that you won't even need a boyfriend. Because, like, what's even the point? Just don't have sex. Sex sounds lame and boring. That'd be my advice. Probably not very good advice. And I probably am the worst possible type of friend that nobody in their right mind would ever want. And I'm self-aware enough to acknowledge that. There's a reason why it's very difficult for me to sustain friendships, because to everyone else who can use their boyfriend or girlfriend as a constant emotional outlet and a repository of their deepest insecurities and thoughts and fears, those type people, friendship is a casual thing. You can show up to your friends and be like, what's up? And then they'll be like, what's up? And then you just go like a couple hours later, because it's like, I have my boyfriend to be my emotional anchor and supply all my needs in terms of having an emotional outlet who I can vent my insecurities to. But for me, because I can't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, I don't have anyone like that. So what I require, I think, at least as far as everything I've been through, and I think this is the healthiest model, is to have a best friend, like someone who's really, really close platonically with me, who can serve as a grounding anchor of emotional support, and then a couple other friends, just to be there, and they're fun too, but they have boyfriends and girlfriends and stuff, and I don't mind that. So long as there's just one person in my life who doesn't have a boyfriend and who spends the majority of their time and attention focused on me, because I think I do need that, and I just can't have sex with them. So I need a really close friend who is willing to forfeit sex basically entirely and see where it goes, and take a risk, take an actual step in an interesting direction with me. And very few people are willing to do that. A common sentiment among asexuals, at least from everything I've heard, again, I don't know any asexuals, because this is the paradox of existing as an asexual, is I imagine most asexuals just kind of hole up at home. They don't really go out and go to parties, they don't go to shows, because they're under the constant impression that everyone at that party or show wants to have sex with them, which is probably true. I'm basically the only outgoing, friendly, social asexual around, to the best of my knowledge. I'm sure there are a lot of them, but they just don't interact with people because it's so fucking insufferable to be around everyone having sex all the time. And I can barely stand it myself. But the general sentiment among asexuals is that you should just make as many friends as possible. This seems to be the solution that people arrive at over and over again. Just keep making friends. The more friends you have, the more fun it'll be. Actually, the more friends I make, because again, I'm pouring an insane amount of emotional investment and effort and time and energy into all these friendships, and none of them are capable of supplying me with the level of emotional support or interesting thought or novelty that I require in a social interaction. I am pouring so much of myself out, not into one person, but into 200 or 300 people evenly, and that creates an immense amount of self-destructive psychic damage, and I don't see how someone couldn't recognize that. That having to treat 300, 500 people all equally with an equal amount of respect and investment and time and energy and patience is just like a mentally taxing challenge that would eventually, I imagine, kill a lot of people, because you can't just pour your mind energy out non-stop constantly to everyone across the board and get basically nothing back. Like, I get nothing out of the vast majority of friendships I have. There are a few that are like better, but the vast majority, it is so empty and vapid and shallow and meaningless, and I need emotional connection and a deep platonic interest. I need this as a person. Everyone acknowledges that people need connection, but if you can just have sex, that's the easy way, and I can't do that. So it's very difficult for me. It's very hard to actually like form a kind of platonic bond that is so strong, so ridiculously unshakable, people actually like care about it. It's just like, oh, we're friends, yeah, bye, I'm gonna go make out with my boyfriend. I don't know how I'm held to this standard, how I'm expected not to mind. That does hurt my feelings, believe it or not. After this, after I mentioned just the insane double standard that we asexuals are held to, which I didn't know at first when I realized I was asexual. I thought it'd be a breeze, I thought it'd be easy, but oh my gosh, it's difficult. It is very difficult to exist in a world which so heavily emphasizes the importance of sex. My sister really went into a tizzy and she was like, it is abusive to want a relationship where your friend never has sex because sex is a human need and it's a right and everyone should be able to have it, and if you can't meet that need, then she's going to get a boyfriend. Sorry. And it's like, again, I don't think sex really is a human need. I don't buy into that. I think sex, and again, this is the only logical conclusion I can arrive at based on what I've seen, is a destructive addiction, like heroin. So for instance, if I had a friend who was a big heroin addict, I would suggest, hey, maybe cut back on the heroin. That's what a good friend would do. Likewise, if I had a friend who was a complete nymphomaniac and who had so much sex that it was like just destroying their life, their productivity, their will to live, then I would be like, hey, maybe cut back on the sex. Likewise, if I had a friend who maybe noticed that me being asexual was destroying my will to live, and they were like, oh, you want to have sex? I actually might be like, yeah, I guess so, I trust you. My sister didn't seem to recognize that just because I'm asexual doesn't mean I wouldn't necessarily be willing to have sex. It's just that I don't understand why someone would want to have sex with me, because sex is kind of a mutual experience by default. And it wouldn't be much fun to have sex with an asexual because we're not responsive to anything that in other people is just like an automatic response. We lack that. So it's less like having sex with me and more like doing sex to me, if that makes sense. I'm not sure why anyone would ever want to have sex with an asexual, but between the three classifications of asexual, sex positive, sex neutral, and sex negative, I'm not grossed out or disgusted by sex or anything. I'm just apathetic towards it. And these days, the big movement is towards sex positivity, but I don't see nearly enough towards, like, sex apathy. Hey, let's not give a shit about sex. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Who the fuck cares? It's just a hobby where you get naked and slam bodies together. It's pretty fucking meaningless. Conversation is way more meaningful. It's the defining characteristic of the human experience, and sex is pretty bland and repetitive. I don't see enough towards sex apathy. Not sex negativity necessarily, but just sex neutrality. I think that's probably the healthiest approach. So if I did trust someone enough, I probably would have sex with them. My sister implied that me wanting less sex in a relationship or no sex would be akin to the person, the relationship, wanting to have sex with me and turning me not asexual. And I was like, well, I'm willing to compromise, so they should also be willing to compromise and maybe tone down the sex a bit, because I don't care or want sex. I don't care about it or want it, so if I'm in a relationship, I don't think it's abusive or wrong for me to want less sex. I think that's just something that anyone who wants to be close to me will have to accept at a certain point, that I lack a reproductive drive. Like, again, consider the double standard here. If there was a relationship where there was some guy who'd had a lot of sex and he fell in love with this girl who was like a total celibate virgin, who'd never had sex before, and he wanted a bunch of sex. Nobody would consider it weird if he gradually acclimatized her to the sexual process, and by the end, they were having sex to roughly the same degree. Likewise, I don't find it weird at all that in a relationship where, say, I'm into some girl who is big into sex, loves sexing it up, I can say, hey, let's have less sex. Let's have less and less sex progressively until you really just don't care about it anymore. Because that would be acclimatizing her gradually through a step-by-step process where she feels comfortable and I feel comfortable, and we've both given our consent to entering a state of sexlessness rather than a state of sex having. That's what I'd prefer. And if someone actually loved me, didn't just want to have sex with me, didn't just view me as an object or a piece of meat, they'd be willing to forfeit sex for my happiness, and they'd find that it's pretty satisfying, all things considered. When you just spend a lot of time talking with someone, that can be immensely rewarding and life-changing and breathtaking and fun and awesome. So it was at this point that my sister accused me of being a misogynist, which I don't know how that makes any sense, considering that I pretty much make friends exclusively with girls, and also the reason most misogynists resent women is because they won't have sex with them, which is the opposite of what I want, which is to not have sex with anyone ever. It was clear to me at this point that my sister was completely subject to the whims of her body, which had taken over her mind a long time ago, and couldn't even imagine that some people might not want to have sex or view sex as a desirable thing, might be a little cautious about sex. I've been around plenty of people who say, I don't want to have sex. I'm not into sex so much. They're not asexual, but they're just very hesitant or negative about sex. They're not into it. And she couldn't imagine a mindset like that. She said, well, sex is a hormonal thing. It changes you and it makes you angry and sad. And I was like, well, I don't do things that make me angry and sad. That's one of the reasons I don't want to have sex, and why I think it's responsible to not have sex, because it can make you angry and sad. Once you engage in this bizarre hormonal exchange with another person, you can become extremely emotionally volatile, and that's no fun. And I only really like doing things that are fun because that makes life better for me. And she was like, well, sometimes you have to do things that aren't fun. And I was like, no, that's a toxic mindset. You shouldn't feel forced to have sex if you don't want to have sex. That's stupid. And one of my biggest problems is that society tends to urge people to reproduce non-stop. I think that society should not urge people to have sex if they don't want to have sex. I think sex should be presented as a choice, not a biological necessity. That's fucking stupid. There's no way everyone wants to have sex. Promotion of sex to an unhealthy degree is just an outgrowth of capitalism, the same outgrowth that requires everyone to consume all the time. You can't really consume products if you're not constantly reproducing and shoving out new infants. This is obviously an unhealthy mindset, but it's the sort of mindset that my sister generally ascribes to, as much as I might hate to admit that. And again, I think it's kind of fallacious to label someone who wants a relationship with no sex a misogynist, just because I happen to be a guy. Imagine if the genders were flipped, and there was an asexual girl who wanted some male companionship, wanted to be around some guy, but every time she got close to a guy, or was like, hey, let's be pals, he's like, I want to stick my penis in you. And she's like, oh, no thanks, I'm asexual. And because of that, these guys constantly just get other girlfriends who they spend all their time and attention with, and this asexual girl is just completely treated as a non-entity, unworthy of thought or consideration by everyone. Now, surely no one would label her a misogynist. That'd be stupid. She's just someone whose sexual orientation happens to marginalize her to an extreme. And it's the same with me. So, I don't see how me not wanting to have sex makes me a misogynist. I think that's fucking dumb. Like I say, everything to do with asexuality is treated with an absurd double standard. My sister somewhat accused me of wanting a relationship where I could manipulate or control the will of someone else, and to an extent that's true. I want to be as much a part of someone's life, like an unavoidable major part of someone's life, as a boyfriend is, and exercise my will over them, and they can exercise their will over me to the same extent. That's just kind of an unavoidable element of any relationship, is that you'll influence the other person in some way, and they'll influence you, ideally in equal measure. But I just don't want to have sex with them. So the problem is that people who have sex are capable of influencing the will and life and trajectory of other people, and people who don't have sex aren't really capable of that, even if they might want to. When I do something, it's labeled as manipulative, but when a boyfriend does something that's functionally the same, it's labeled as, oh, he loves her so much, he cares so much. Even if he's doing the exact same thing, when a boyfriend does it, it's special and cute and great and nothing but beneficial. If he wraps his girlfriend around his finger and prevents her from having any male friends of any kind. There have been plenty of times where one of my friend's boyfriends will be like, oh, you don't get to talk to Nick because he probably wants to have sex with you. They won't say that outright, but I know that's what goes on behind closed doors, and that's an example of a boyfriend being manipulative and controlling what his girlfriend can or can't do, and preventing a healthy intergender friendship from forming, and that's okay. It's a-okay for a boyfriend to be jealous, but if I'm jealous as a friend, and I don't like a boyfriend taking up all the time and attention of my friend, that's not okay. I'm selfish and manipulative for that. And keep in mind, if I had this hypothetical great platonic friendship with someone, it would be way less manipulative than any romantic relationship I've ever been around. I wouldn't want to have sex with my friend. I wouldn't kiss and smooch and hug and rub my friend. I'd just be like, hey, let's play a board game once a week. Or more if you want, but that's all I really need. Just a stable, constant conversationalist who's able to be there at a steady pace and relatively consistently. I wouldn't be like, yo, have sex with me. I don't want that. So I don't get how I'm manipulative, but a boyfriend is like cool and normal. Boyfriends, at least from what I've seen of them, the vast majority, are psychotic, hormone-driven assholes who just make my life 1,000 times worse by their mere existence. If anything, I'm not a misogynist, I'm a misandrist. I don't like boyfriends. About this time you might be saying, well, Nick, you don't experience sexual attraction or romantic attraction. You're not even human. You're not even a person. Again, this is sort of the depersonalization rhetoric that makes asexual discourse, but I would argue that what separates human beings from animals is that we are capable of controlling our primal impulses with our sentient minds. We have free will and rational thought, and we can do great things with those tools. Like, for instance, if we have a violent impulse, like we want to punch someone, we can control that. I've never really punched anyone my whole life because I've managed to suppress my violent impulses, which maybe I would have had, but I've become a civilized person who's able to keep that in check. Likewise, you can suppress your sexual impulses. I don't think I've ever had sexual impulses, but it's my belief that anyone can completely destroy their sex drive if they really want to, and just stop having sex. I think it can be done. Like, if you feel the need to grope or suck or rub, just say, no, I have a brain. I'm a human being, and I'm capable of so much more than giving in to my carnal instincts. I can do so much more than have sex, which is what animals do. I can write a book, I can create art, I can talk and think, I can chart the cosmos, I can travel the world, I can do so many more things besides stick my genitals next to someone else's genitals, which is a meaningless waste of time, ultimately. So you might argue that because I completely lack a sex drive, I'm less human. I would argue the less sex you have, the more human you are. Animals have sex and beat each other up and rip each other to shreds and go at it, and human beings, at least civilized human beings, are able to control their deep-seated evolutionary impulses with a sentient mind. That's a great thing to have. Ultimately, who's more likely to be a misogynist abuser in terms of someone you can form a relationship with? Someone like myself who has no idea what sex is or how it works or why anyone even has it, or the hormone-driven caveman who wants to have sex every 5 minutes and lets his body rule him. I think that type of person, in all honesty, is rather pathetic. The same goes for the female equivalent. My sister, for instance, defines herself as an incel, and I've told her about how defining oneself as an incel is a mental prison, and it's rather pathetic, but she keeps on going. I asked her, "Do you consider yourself a femcel?" And she was like, "That's so offensive to define me by my gender." And I was like, "Well, you call yourself an incel, I'm going to laugh at you because that's absurd and pathetic and deserves mockery. It's worthy of open derision because incels in concept are fucking stupid. They're a bunch of guys, and girls for that matter, who want to have sex but just won't fucking have sex already. And I'm in a completely different scenario, a far more interesting one all things considered, where I don't want to have sex, but I do want someone to talk to or be around or think with, because it's kind of boring and miserable just being alone all the time, and my mind is slowly decaying. No one's willing to have the type of relationship that I'm into, and everyone treats me, again, according to these absurd double standards, where if I do something, it's wrong, but if a boyfriend does it, it's a-okay and really cool, and we should all congratulate and clap for these boyfriend-type people who just have sex and let their bodies control them and don't create anything of meaningful value. Every so often, I wonder if asexuality is even real, or if I'm just extremely sexually and romantically repressed. If I were to feel romantic attraction to someone, I probably wouldn't even be able to recognize it at the point I'm at, much less admit it to whoever it was. In all likelihood, either I'm a member of an extremely rare sexual orientation where I'm essentially in a position where everyone will pretend to congratulate me and be like, yay, you're so proud, you're LGBT, but I'm not willing to go on this voyage with you, I'm not willing to be there for you, you can do it on your own, I've got my boyfriend, my partner, I did great for you, and everyone congratulates me all the time, but nobody is actually asexual, certainly nobody's proud to be asexual. Or, I've completely bought into this bit that is ultimately self-destructive and it's bad for my mental and physical health. I don't know. I really don't know, because I've never felt what I guess one would consider as a sexual impulse as far as I'm aware. My sister suggested that I've been heartbroken, but I don't know if I'm really capable of being heartbroken in the way that people typically describe it. I'm not really prone to having my heart break when one of my friends gets a boyfriend and starts spending all their time with their boyfriend, but I am somewhat disappointed because it's more evidence of people giving in to their base impulses rather than exercising cerebral, cold, rational, logical thought over the situation and recognizing that sexual intercourse is a futile means of immortality through genetic reproduction, which is ultimately bullshit because your children aren't you, they're just half you, and grandchildren are only a quarter of you, and so on. And until cloning becomes a reality, immortality won't be accessible to anyone. I can't really get heartbroken at the point I'm at, because everything that everyone has done like 3,000 times over, I've been through this so often and it has become so absurdly repetitive. The only conclusion I can draw is that, holy shit, people are susceptible to their hormones and can't stop having sex, and this is completely insufferable. And I need to stop being around people that have sex, because it is so repetitive and boring and meaningless to me, and I get nothing out of it, and it's just a waste of my time and energy. And there's no reason why I should invest all my friendship into people who can't return it back to me. Friendship should be a mutual exchange of ideas and thoughts and feelings and opinions and humanity. It shouldn't just be where I just go, hey, and then my friend goes, hey, I'm gonna go have sex with this other person now. I'm just fucking sick of that. I can't be around that anymore. It's completely broken me. Again, maybe I am just sexually repressed and I don't understand how human relationships work. Maybe I don't understand how human relationships work, but I'm not sexually repressed. Maybe it's just that it's impossible for me to understand how human relationships work, and I lack a lot of, basic empathy, or what people would call empathy, when really they just mean let people walk all over you and use you as much as they want while saying nothing and doing nothing and never sticking up for yourself. Maybe I lack that sort of empathy. I think I am capable of empathy towards people who are really good platonic friends, and the more platonic friendship someone expresses towards me, the better a platonic friend I'll be, ultimately. That's kind of unavoidable, and eventually, if I have a friend who's good enough, I get to the point where I don't even really need any other friends, and we just become best friends for life. Good pals, solid, there for each other, platonic types who just support each other and are great, and it's fun to be around. But I don't know if that'll happen anytime soon. I'm very bored with interacting with people because time and again they fail to surprise me in any meaningful way, and they operate on the same cyclical patterns where they keep succumbing to these romantic interests or whatever the fuck it is, and I'm tired of that. I am so tired. I have put out 12 albums and like 4 movies and VHS tapes and fucking comics and novels and short stories, and I write so much and draw so much and think so much, and I just think it's kind of unfair that some people just get to have sex all the time and steal all my friends from me, and that's just like, A-okay, yippee, I'm just ruining this person's life with just constant validation and placation, and they're just in this sex coma, incapable of conscious thought. I don't know, something about that is just wrong to me. Again, asexual double standard. It's absurd. It is a completely surreal existence to live like this, because it's paradoxic. You recognize that you need human closeness to a certain extent, but the type of human closeness you're capable of experiencing and expressing, nobody values, nobody takes seriously, nobody wants. So you just end up feeling like shit, and I don't even really feel like a member of the human species ultimately. It's insane. Anyway, I guess the moral of all this is don't tell an asexual you want to be friends unless you really want to be friends, because they do take it seriously. At least I do. Again, maybe there are asexuals out there who are just okay with never knowing anybody and never talking to anybody and never going outside, but I kind of feel like I have to at the point I'm at, and I wouldn't want to give up all social interaction entirely, but do not say that you want to be friends with an asexual and aromantic person if you don't want to be friends, or if you have ulterior motives and you want sex out of them, or you're going to have sex with someone else. It doesn't work out, at least from, again, my own personal experience, which I have to think is worth something. Surely it means something to someone, somewhere, somehow. I don't know. Maybe I'm just completely deluded and immature and strung out in my own specific way. Maybe I just need to have sex and fuck my brains out. Or maybe I need to be treated like a person for once. I don't know. Who the fuck knows, you know? Crazy. Anyway, yeah, that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe if you'd like to see maybe more content like this in the future. This video is pretty extensive, probably the most extensive asexuality video I've made to date, but I figured it was worth creating because it is a subject that weighs heavily on my mind, what with how allonormative the world is, and I am tired. So I'm going to edit this and then go to sleep. Hope you enjoyed watching. Yeah, all that stuff. Nick Cicada, 2024. Vroom.
You're not right. You know nothing about life.
Hi, Anton. I'm recording. I'm wasting time right now. Hey, Anton.
Why are you making videos about things you don't know?
I do know.
Hey,
Anton,
it's
I'm
like
recording.
you don't. It's like
I'm recording.
It's like, why do you make videos about things you don't even have the really like,
May as well. I don't have anything else going on.
You're exposing yourself to the internet. They're just going to say that you're wrong.
I don't care. I don't care. I've been through that a million times. Anton, I'm trying to record. Please leave me alone.
Just keep doing your thing.
Okay, thank you.